All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how data is being used, to shape the future of how we train doctors. It's a pretty fascinating area. We've got this review, right, that really goes deep into learning analytics and big data in medical education.
Yeah, absolutely. And this deep dive that we're doing, it's based on 18 different studies published over like almost a decade, up to April 2021. And these studies weren't just chosen randomly. The review actually did a really systematic search of these huge databases like Medline and SOIndex. So they followed a really rigorous process to make sure they were capturing like a complete picture of the research out there.
So basically, for our listeners, what we want to do today is like break this down, right? We want to give you a clear understanding of how learning analytics are actually being used in medical schools today, and what are some of the things we should be thinking about as this field, keeps developing.
Yeah.
Think of it as a shortcut, right, to getting up to speed on something that's pretty complex and super important. Um, so to kick things off, maybe we can start with the basics. What exactly are learning analytics and big data when we're talking about, this specific area of medical education?
Well, the Society for Learning Analytics Research, they have a pretty helpful definition. They say it's about measuring, collecting, analyzing, and reporting data on learners and their environments to understand and improve learning.
Okay.
And when we talk about big data, we're talking about those massive amounts of information we have available now.
Right.
And that really provides the kind of raw material for these learning analytics.
Right. So it's like the fuel, right? And then learning analytics is like, how do we actually get something useful out of that fuel?
Exactly. Exactly.
So this review that we're looking at, it found four main ways these tools are being used in medical education. Can you walk us through those key areas?
Yeah, for sure. So the first area is all about the learning process and pedagogy. Basically, learning analytics is being used to understand how individual students learn. So like really getting granular, are they visual learners? Are they auditory learners? How are they processing information?
Yeah.
It can spot patterns in student engagement. So like, are they actually showing up? Are they doing the readings? All that kind of stuff.
Right.
Tracking how well students are performing. Obviously, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And then also trying to figure out which teaching approaches are most effective. So are lectures working? Are small group discussions working? Are simulations working?
So you're saying instead of just like looking at the whole class, we can actually start to see how each student is doing and how they learn best.
Right, right, exactly. It's much more personalized, getting that unique learning journey of each student.
That's really cool. What's the second area then where these tools are being applied?
So the second area is called retrospective assessment, which sounds fancy, but it just means looking back.
Okay, looking back.
Yeah. So you're looking at past performance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And learning analytics can help identify students who might have struggled, allowing for targeted support later on.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't do as well as they could have on a certain topic, so how can we go back and help them with that?
Right.
It can also provide really detailed information on a student's competencies.
Hmm.
So, not just like, oh, you got a B, but like, okay, here are the specific areas within, cardiology that you're strong in, and here are some areas that you might need to work on.
Yeah.
And it can even automate some of the scoring processes, which frees up faculty time, obviously.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the big idea here is understanding how students have developed over time and getting insights into their learning strategies kind of after the fact.
So it's not just about like a final grade at the end. It's like understanding the whole process that got them there.
Right, exactly.
That's really interesting. Okay, now the third one, this sounds like it's more about looking ahead. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the third area is prospective assessment. This one often involves trying to predict future performance.
Okay.
And the idea here is to use data to forecast how students might perform, both academically and in their clinical work.
Yeah.
So, for example, it could be predicting their clinical skills, how ready they are to graduate, how ready they are to practice independently, even how they might perform later in their careers.
Oh, wow. So we're talking like really predictions about like their whole trajectory.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing. And I can see how that would be really helpful for, identifying students who might need extra help or students who are, excelling and maybe need more advanced opportunities.
Exactly. Exactly. Early intervention is key.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to the fourth one, which is how this data is actually being used to improve the educational programs themselves, right?
Yes. So the fourth area is educational improvement.
Hmm.
And Learning analytics is seen as a key to delivering what's called precision education.
Precision education.
Yeah, so that means personalizing the learning content, offering very specific help, giving really tailored feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to make quick adjustments to teaching methods based on the data.
Okay.
So like, if you see that students are consistently struggling with a certain concept, you can adapt the curriculum or the teaching methods to address that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the goal here is to make the entire educational experience more efficient and effective for everybody, both students and faculty.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got these four main ways that learning analytics are being used, understanding how students learn, looking back at their performance, predicting how they might do in the future, and then improving the programs overall.
Right.
Sounds like there's a lot of potential here to really change medical education for the better.
Absolutely. Imagine being able to tailor the curriculum to the specific needs of each student, or like we were saying, identifying early on who might need that extra support to really succeed.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's exciting, yeah. So with all this data being collected and analyzed, what are some of the things we need to be super careful about? What are some of the potential downsides here?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Uh, I I think one of the biggest things is just understanding the data itself.
Okay.
We need to think about its quality, how well it represents the entire student population, and how accurate it is. For example, are the assessment methods we're using actually capturing the full picture of a student's abilities?
Right. So just because we have a lot of data doesn't necessarily mean it's good data or that it's telling us everything we need to know.
Exactly. And we also need to be really thoughtful about how we analyze this data. With so much information, it can be easy to find connections that might not actually mean anything.
Right.
Like you might find a correlation between, I don't know, shoe size and exam scores, but that doesn't mean one causes the other.
Yeah.
So it's about making sure that our methods can reliably identify patterns that are actually meaningful and not just random noise.
So it's not just about collecting data. It's about being smart about how we interpret it.
Exactly. And, as we collect more and more information about learners, including things like their activity in online learning platforms, how much time they're spending on certain modules, what they're clicking on, all of that, we need to be really mindful of how this data is being handled and who has access to it.
Yeah.
Maintaining the security and confidentiality of this information is super important. Students need to feel confident that their data is being protected.
Right. So it's like a trust issue. Right.
Exactly.
They need to know that, this information isn't going to be used against them in some way.
Right. And, finally, we need to be careful about how we use learning analytics to identify students who might be struggling. The goal is to provide support, but we need to avoid labeling students in ways that could negatively impact their learning or their future opportunities.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? Because we want to use data to help students, but we don't want to accidentally create negative biases or limit their potential.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
It is. Okay, so looking ahead then, what are some of the really exciting possibilities that learning analytics could unlock in medical education?
I think one of the most promising areas is this idea of precision education that we were talking about before.
Okay.
Imagine being able to truly personalize the learning experience for each student, providing them with exactly what they need when they need it.
Yeah.
So this could mean earlier identification of students who are struggling, right? More targeted opportunities for them to catch up, and even allowing students who are excelling to move ahead at their own pace.
Right. So it's really optimizing the learning journey for each individual.
Exactly.
So they can get the support they need, but they can also, move ahead as quickly as they're ready.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Another exciting possibility is that learning analytics can help us identify gaps in the training programs themselves.
Okay.
So by looking at student performance data across different areas, educators can get insights into where the curriculum might need to be strengthened or updated.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a certain topic that students are consistently struggling with, and that might signal that, hey, we need to rethink how we're teaching this.
Right. So it's not just about helping individual students. It's about making the whole program better.
Absolutely. And by tracking program performance over time, institutions can also demonstrate the effectiveness of their teaching methods, to accrediting bodies or whatever.
Yeah.
And it can also help them identify areas for innovation. So, what are some new things that we can be doing to make our program even better?
It seems like this whole idea of like collecting educational data is becoming more and more common, not just in medicine, but in, all kinds of fields.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess it's really important that we're thinking carefully about how we use these tools responsibly and in a way that actually benefits everybody involved.
Absolutely. It's about finding that right balance between leveraging the power of data to improve education
Mm.
while also being really mindful of the individual experiences and needs of the learners.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's about the people, right?
It is.
It's about the students and making sure they're getting the best possible education.
Okay, so to wrap things up, I think this deep dive has shown us that learning analytics and big data are offering some really interesting and potentially game-changing ways to shape the future of medical education.
Yeah,
From understanding individual learning styles to predicting future performance to enhancing the educational programs themselves, there's a lot of potential here.
for sure.
But we also need to be really thoughtful about how we collect and use this data to make sure it's accurate, fair, and ultimately, benefits the learners. Exactly. As these technologies become more and more integrated into medical education, I think ongoing evaluation and discussion are going to be crucial to make sure they're being used effectively and ethically,
Yeah,
to support the development of future medical professionals.
absolutely. So here's a question for our listeners to think about. As data becomes an increasingly important part of, professional training, not just in medicine, but in all kinds of fields, how do you see the balance being struck between using that data to improve learning and making sure that, the individual learner's journey and opportunities are respected?
Yeah.
What questions does this exploration raise for you about the future of how we learn and develop in professional settings? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.